Do you know an adult or organization that provides outstanding service through demonstrated involvement in the development and implementation of scouting opportunities for youth from rural or low-income urban backgrounds? Well, if you do, did you know that there's a BSA award you can nominate them for to recognize their contributions to your community? This week, we'll learn more about the Whitney M. Young Jr. Service Award on this edition of Artifact of the Week. Whitney M. Young Jr. was born in Shelby County, Kentucky on July 31, 1921. He earned his Bachelor of Science degree in social work from Kentucky State University, where he also played basketball and was a member of the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. He graduated in 1941, and after Pearl Harbor, Young enlisted in the Army, was trained in electrical engineering, and was assigned to a road construction crew of black soldiers supervised by white officers. 3 weeks later, he was promoted from private to first sergeant, a move which created serious tensions with both his fellow soldiers as well as the officers appointed above him. Young was able to navigate these tensions, and this placed him on the path to a career in race relations after the war. Young married his wife Margaret in 1944, and in 1947 earned a master's degree in social work from the University of Minnesota. He also started to volunteer with the St. Paul chapter of the National Urban League and was appointed to the role of Industrial Relations Secretary in 1949. The following year, he became the president of the Omaha, Nebraska chapter, where he was instrumental in opening up jobs for black workers that had previously been reserved for whites only. During this time, he also taught at the University of Nebraska and Creighton University. In 1954, Young became the first Dean of Social Work at Atlanta University, a position he held until 1961 when he became Executive Director of the National Urban League. Under his leadership, the Urban League rose to the forefront of the civil rights movement. He successfully expanded its mission while simultaneously maintaining the support of influential white business and political leaders. Many of Young's ideas and initiatives were eventually incorporated into President Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty. Young never forgot the successes he experienced in Omaha and pushed major corporations to hire more blacks within their companies. During this time, he cultivated close relationships with white CEOs, which led some blacks to accuse him of selling out to the white establishment. Young countered these criticisms, stressing the importance of working within the system to create lasting change. Despite his understanding and willingness to do more from the inside, he also knew there were times to take a stand in favor of civil rights by broadening the approach of the Urban League, expanding its services, and launching new programs aimed at providing equal opportunity in employment, education, housing, health, and welfare. In 1963, he was one of the 10 organizers of the August March on Washington, in opposition to many of his white business allies. To quote Young, "At the critical moments, you've got to be there and be counted." Whitney Young was a well-educated, articulate, widely respected individual. He carved out a major role for himself and the National Urban League in the civil rights struggle, even though he never appeared on a picket line and he was never arrested. On May 24, 1968, Whitney Young was the keynote speaker at the 58th annual meeting of the National Council of the Boy Scouts of America. In his speech, he said, "Only the most naive optimist could fail to perceive that the winds of change are fast approaching to tornado proportions throughout the world's society, including our own. That the disinherited and the disillusioned and the have-nots of our society are not only aware of the pervasive gap between their standard of living and other people, but are doggedly determined to somehow change that condition. They are quickly gaining as strong and articulate and determined allies all of the young people of this country, whatever their nationalities. For us to ignore this wind of change, for us to glibly interpret it as a phenomenon of the moment, as a transitory incident which will pass away, would be the height of folly. We will do this at our very peril." I read this morning with a great deal of interest the story in the New York Times about the decisions which you made in the course of this conference. It's an impressive statement of intent, but I would remind you that history is replete with the yawning chasm between man's intentions and his deeds, between pledge and performance, between high aspiration and most often low attainment. It would be misleading to let you think you have taken on an easy task. I commend you for having taken it on. But in a period where we are most often the victims of more rhetoric than relevance and more symbolism than substance, it is awfully important for us not to leave this meeting as leaders of the Boy Scout movement with any notion that we've done any more than just articulate policy. This is going to call for the very best that your history and legacy has equipped you to do. The unfinished task of making real the dream of justice and equality for all calls us from our comfortable complacency, our insensitivity, our indifference. That task beckons with the finger of urgency to involvement. Participation in the realization of a dream, tempted as we are to take the wings of a dove and fly away to rest. We may get away from it, but we can't get away from it all. The suburbs aren't far enough, the skyscrapers aren't high enough, the clubs aren't exclusive enough, the world isn't big enough. For we are part and parcel of the problem. And now, may the truth that makes us free, and the hope that never dies, and the love that casts out hate and fear lead us forward, together, until the day spring breaks and the shadows flee away. And as we toil amidst things as they are, may our vision of things yet to be strengthen and inspire us. Young's words from 1968 still ring true for the BSA today on a variety of topics. Whitney Young served as an advisor to Presidents Kennedy, Johnson, and Nixon. In 1969, President Johnson honored Young with the highest civilian award, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and President-elect Nixon offered Young a cabinet post which he did not accept, believing he could do more through the Urban League. On March 11, 1971, Young apparently drowned after suffering a heart attack while swimming with friends in Lagos, Nigeria, where he was attending a conference sponsored by the African American Institute. President Nixon sent a plane to Nigeria to collect Young's body and personally traveled to Kentucky to deliver his eulogy.
Today, a grateful nation will pay its respect to Whitney Young by continuing the work for which he dedicated his entire life. It is really easy to be for what is right. What is more difficult is to accomplish what is right. And Whitney Young's genius was, he knew how to accomplish what other people were merely for.
The Boy Scouts of America created the Whitney M. Young Jr. Service Award in 1979 to recognize outstanding service by an adult individual or an organization for demonstrated involvement in the development and implementation of scouting opportunities for youth from rural or low-income urban backgrounds. This is a fulfillment of Whitney Young's dream of justice and equality for all, and is intended to recognize those that have made significant contributions in our communities but may not qualify for the Silver Beaver or Silver Antelope recognition. Since its inception, more than 4,000 individuals and organizations have been recognized for their efforts with disadvantaged and underrepresented youths in our community. Here at the National Scouting Museum, we have one of the original 1979 plaques in the collection, along with a number of other related recognition items. You can download the nomination form from the official BSA website under Awards Central. Well, that's all the time we have this week. Join us next time as we continue to learn about the history of the BSA while continuing to look at more of the museum's collection through Artifact of the Week.